Aderonka Batamosi Wilson, and I am your moderator for this evening. I am pleased to introduce the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Curtis Dickinson, and the Junior Minister of Finance, the Honorable Wayne Furbert, who will each give a presentation this evening. I am happy to also acknowledge with us tonight the Premier, the Honorable David Burt, JP MP, Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Walter Roban, JP MP, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Kathy Simmons, JP. Minister for the Cabinet Office, the Honorable Walton Brown, JP MP. Minister of Public Works, Lieutenant Colonel David Birch, JP MP. Minister of National Security, the Honorable Wayne Keynes, JP MP. Minister of Labor, Community Affairs and Sports, the Honorable Levita Fogo, JP MP. Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rabane, JP MP. Minister without portfolio, the Honorable Jamal Simmons, JP MP. After the Minister and Junior Minister give their presentations, we'll take questions and comments from you, the audience. Please be aware that this event is being streamed live by Bernews and CITV. Thank you. Minister?
Thanks, Aderonka. Can you hear me? Okay. No? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The protocol having already been established. Thank you all for being here this evening. Our meeting this evening is important as it allows us to hear from you, from the people of Bermuda, your thoughts, your concerns in advance of the 2019-2020 budget. In keeping with our 2017 general election platform pledge on openness and transparency, our budget process is clear and transparent, and our pre-budget report explains the factors driving the government's fiscal policy decisions while giving everyone the opportunity to make their views known. It demonstrates fiscal discipline during very uncertain times while being sensitive to the impact these proposals have on everyone. Our next budget will come from collaboration with key stakeholders, organizations, and individuals. It is important to generate revenue to appropriately address our debt. It is also necessary to generate more revenue to be able to properly fund the services that the government provides. As we address Bermuda's debt, we are not forgetting the needs of our citizens. The increases are designed for those who can afford them, not for our citizens that struggle day to day to survive. And let me go a little bit ad lib here. I know that there has been lots of talk and disquiet around the concept of a rent tax. Let me address it now, and my junior minister will address it further in the presentation that will follow my remarks. The rent tax was a recommendation made by the Tax Reform Commission. We presented the idea to get your feedback. I have not decided on whether to implement the rent tax or at what threshold the rent tax will apply. My decisions will be informed by the inputs I get from you and other stakeholders. So the goal of the budget will be to ensure that Bermuda benefits from our economy's success, that all Bermudians benefit from our economy's success while we grow Bermuda's economy. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to the Junior Minister of Finance, the Honorable Wayne Furbert, who's going to take you through some slides, and then we will entertain your questions.
Thank you, Minister. Are you clapping for me or the Minister? Okay. Both. Okay. All right, so we have a presentation as far as slides. It probably should take about 15 minutes. I'm not going to touch on all the points. Most of the things you probably can read for yourselves, and we'll just go through some highlights. So in order for Bermuda to succeed, we need to return our economy to a path of balanced growth that creates jobs, provides rising income, and assists our budget challenges. It is our belief that a better environment must be created in which Bermudian businesses can thrive, opportunities for Bermudians can be created, and in which capable, qualified Bermudians can be earned opportunities to work, train, and succeed at every level. And that was in our platform in 2017. So what's the purpose of the pre-budget report? First of all, this is the third pre-budget report that the Progressive Party has done. The first one was 2012, one last year, and I must say the room was, maybe because I was speaking first, but it was very few people here that listened to me last year. I guess it's Curtis, everybody wants to come out to Curtis, but it's quite, so this is our third one. And it's just be open. When, you know I've been around for a while, most time ministers get up on budget day, brings the budget to Parliament, and you get what you hear on budget day. No if, buts about it. On budget day, that's what you hear. But the government said we're going to be open, transparent, and consult with yourselves on the way forward. Because every revenue raise, every expenditure expended, it affects individuals. So the objective of the pre-budget report is to increase the public awareness of a government's fiscal and budget policy objectives and to establish a benchmark for evaluating the conduct of fiscal and budget policy. Principles of our fiscal policy is to prudently manage the fiscal financial risks, maintain the government's debt contingent liabilities at prudent levels, ensure that fiscal policies contribute to the achievement of adequate national saving. Promoting fairness and equity in both spending and taxes, exercise fiscal discipline, maintain the integrity of the tax system, ensure that policy decisions have regard to their financial effects on future generations. Consideration when preparing the budget: economic growth, fiscal discipline, direct outcomes of government's economic and social policies. Shrinking tax base, I'll talk about that in a few minutes, deficit reduction, prudent management of national debt, and of course, the rating agencies. Lower U.S. corporate tax rate. As you know, Trump lowered the U.S. tax rate, which could have an impact on us. External threat: EU, OECD, CFATF, aging population, rising healthcare costs. These are all things that affect the budget. EU substance is the greatest challenge and threat that Bermuda faces today. Next. The government, as you know, the legislation that the government laid in Parliament was to protect Bermuda as an international business. We are one of 41 jurisdictions that has to address the European Code of Conduct concern, failing would risk Bermuda being on the list of non-cooperative jurisdictions. Economic substance is the criteria by which we will be judged by. The world is changing, and Bermuda is not isolated from this change. It is important to know that this is not just an EU issue. It is an OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development issue. So what is economic substance? You'll be hearing that more and more. Physical presence in Bermuda, income generation in Bermuda, control from Bermuda, employees from Bermuda. This could be good for Bermuda. Well, debt is in the first graph. You'll see debt net of sinking fund has risen from 197 net of sinking fund up to 2.470 million in 2018. Billion, sorry, billion. 2.740 billion. Total filled jobs. In 2008, we had 40,213 filled jobs. 2017, we're down 33,653. The red consists of Bermudian workers. The green consists of non-Bermudian workers, exempt, PRCs is there. The yellow is for, I can't see them. Yellow is PRC, and the green and the blue is spousal Bermudians. So most of the jobs, and I'll show you in a few minutes, you see this change. These are Bermudians here. This line here is non-Bermudians. Next slide. So between 2008 and 2017, here's some facts. Next. 3,209 less Bermudans working since 2008. Next one. 3,513 less foreign workers since 2008. Here's the striking one. And why we're looking at raising taxes, hit it again. Between 60 and 70 million dollars of revenue less per year. If we had that number, we wouldn't be talking around tax reform as much as we are talking. 60 to 70. Matter of fact, the number is pretty even higher than that. But I took a conservative number and went by that. So if you look at the chart here, and unfortunately you can't see it, but this is supposed to be red, represents tax paid based on our population. So we used to have, population was about 2008, on average was about just under $14,000 per citizen, out of about 60-some thousand. On average right now, about just over 17,000 people. So, it only can increase, as I said last year, if we don't, and I'm really joking, don't get me serious about this one. The government has to raise revenue to meet it's expensive, and if we don't find additional revenue, then we have to tax everybody for walking the street. That's a joke. But there are means that government has to look for, taxes to raise. But that increases. But it goes back to the premise of we have lost more jobs in Bermuda since 2008. And hence, and these are actually companies, and 2017, 18 has had an impact. Next. All right, so this is the expenditure, revenue, and a surplus. So in 2000, you see that our surplus and deficit, I should say, has gone from 136 in 2008, 209, these are million, 2010, 229 million, 2012, 299, 2016, 2017 was 182 million deficit. This year is $67 million deficit. So there's been a drop. So we've come back, we've climbed back from the deficit where we were, and the next move is where should the deficit end this year and going forward. Okay, so current expenditure. Now remember, expenditures are made up of a current account, capital, and interest, and all those things. But this here shows the current account. The current account's going from 219 from 9. So people say it's cut government expenditure, but there's expenditure has been cut from 999 million down to 914 million. This here includes. You remember the money that was taken out for the hospital. So we've been up here a little more. So the money was taken out of the hospital expenditure and put towards the America's Cup. No, I'm just joking, but it was. So, well, it was. No, go back. Yeah. So it's going from 999 to really 916 million in 2018. And that's by government being more efficient, cutting back on certain things. So you can see that things have taken place. And out of the 929 million, 92, whatever, 1/3 is for the hospital. $300 and some million for the hospital. Out of that, salary is only $400 and some million. So it's a little small piece that government plays with between the grants and contributions, that's what it is, and the salary portion. Next. Okay, so the interest expense versus sinking fund. And sinking fund is where money is set aside for future release of debt. So it's going from interest expense, which is the blue, going from 14 million up to 118 million. Notice a drop from 217 to 218 by 3 million. And the sinking fund's going from 4 million up to $62 million. So that's not clear, but it basically shows that interest as a percentage of revenue has gone from 1% up to 11. In 2017 it was 12, in 2016 was 12 also, but now 11% in 2018. So it's been an improvement. So frame the 2019-18 budget. Taxation, sensitivity, deficit and high debt levels, fiscal strategy to halt the rise of debt. Economic substance incentive program. Because we know that the economic substance program, the government put in some initiatives to encourage those businesses to stay here or even come here from other jurisdictions. Retail relief, the government is considering, recognizing the pressure on certain segments within that sector, in an effort to maintain and increase employment levels in that sector. The government is considering providing some form of targeted payroll relief to specific business in the retail sector, whose annual payrolls are greater than $1 million. We accept this one? No, just joking. So rental tax, commercial and residential. The government is considering, and the minister will speak to about later on, commercial and residential units aligned with the recommendation of the TRC report. It proposed that the tax will be charged on the ARV of the property. Now, so how did we get to this stage? I was on the tax reform committee, and we had over 500 people that came to see us during that period of time. And the question was, how do we make the taxes collected fair and equitable? There are individuals who own 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 apartments. Surprise? No, there are people who actually own that. The average Bermuda may own 1 or 2, but there are people who own. So the question is, how do we get after those individuals that own 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 apartments? Because even 90 times 1,000, $90,000 per month, times 12 is, you can work that out yourself. So the thing was not to go after rental on ARV. Now, ARV, annual rental value. So most 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms fall under the 22,000 ARV. Most of them, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. Most people build a house and add an apartment, which is 1-bedroom or studio, to pay for their mortgage, on average. Okay? So the idea was to know, and there is a cap, let me explain this. So 22,000 was the cutoff point. Anything under 22,000 ARV, there was no proposal for rental tax. However, there could be individuals that earn 25, 30, 40, 1-bedrooms. True, you know, there are people there. So how do you make it fair and equitable? So the tax reform said, okay, let's go up to a 90,000 ARV bracket. Anybody over that will be charged. So you're allowed $90,000 ARV free per year. We'll take some more questions if you're not clear on that, but that's how the whole idea came up, and it's proposal to the government is considering. Next. Financial service tax, we're considering increasing the financial service tax on insurance premiums. This was put in place in 2016 by Bob Bridgetts, and the government's looking to increase that. Foreign currency purchase tax, this used to be 0.5%. It went up to 1% in 2016, and the government is considering raising it by 0.25% or 0.75%. Their decision has not been made yet. We are considering every one of them. Next. Land tax. I'm going to show you a remarkable picture in a few minutes and blow everybody's mind. But we are considering amending the land tax rate structure for residential properties by increasing tax for properties with ARV under $22,000 to a flat rate of $250 per annum. The tax reform recommended to the government $500. And why was that? Most people own a car here. So to license your car, it costs $1,200 a year. Some pays more. To license some of your houses for 1 year costs $7. Shocking? I'm just using the analogy. It's land tax. I'm saying licensing your car, because everybody's land tax is paid on an annual basis. I'm using the terminology licensing to land tax. I'm just trying to show a comparison. So to license your car, it costs between $1,200, maybe pay up saying $1,600 for the car. And I got the right number on. It was $23. $23 to license your house. That's for the Minister of Works to pick up your trash, to pave your road, and the list goes on and on for providing services. $23. That's shocking, isn't it? It didn't hit me until after I looked at the numbers. Go ahead. So, check this one out. Out of the 27,418 homes in Bermuda, land tax is the most progressive thing we have around here. 1,022 pays $23 million of the $42 million collected. They pay 56% of the land tax. Most progressive thing they've done. Done by former government. The rates changed tremendously. Nobody even winked a link. Running from high ends, these two groups right here. These two groups here only add up to about the 1,000 homes. All these homes here, and most of these are one bedrooms, which you receive rental income for, pay $23 a year on average. So the government's looking at it. That's why the tax reform said, okay, well, is it wrong to license your house? Use the analogy for land tax. License your house for $500 to get more trash collected, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the government is considering land tax increase. Okay, next. All right, what was this graph? So it shows the number of units in the bands of taxable taxable rates. So in the 0 to 11,000, there's just under 1,000 homes, which mainly this is studios. In the one bedrooms, there are 13,000 one bedrooms homes in Bermuda. This pays $23 average a year, and this pays average of $167 a year. And these are the ones, including myself, I'm guilty in this one, may collect rent for $1,400 a month on a one bedroom, $1,200 a month for one bedroom, but I pay $23 a year. All right, next. This one is all right, so I said that, check this out, if you can see it. This group here pays 47% of the land tax bill. They pay an average of $36,000 a year in land tax. That's why I told them very progressive. The studios pay, I got it wrong, $73. So this group here, which is mainly studios, one bedrooms, pay $73, some pay $167. I know some of us are in this group. I'm in this group. I'm guilty. And then it goes on. So you see the most progressive tax is land tax. These two pay the largest portion of land tax in Bermuda. And they're not all down Pakistan. Don't think so. Next. What? I'm sorry, what? It depends. You know, where you can take up, okay, here's how they do it. Don't continue, the minister's got to follow my boss. He told me keep on going. But we could answer the question later on. Tax collection, we're looking at that. And I've been chairman of the efficiency committee. Everybody says to go after tax, and we're working hard to find some ways. I can tell you right now that some of the taxes on payroll tax in particular will have to be written off. You never collect it. Never collect it. Next. Again, tax collection and accounts receivable, we're looking at some things. Next. Government efficiency, as I said, the government, under the premier setup of the efficiency committee, we looked at a few things, made some recommendations, and we'll continue to look at some things. Next. Again, government by numbers. The Minister of Finance is keeping current account the same as last year, no increase, $929 million last year, $929 million this year. Next. The government started to look at capital expenditure, somewhere about $60 million, similar to last year. Next. So summary of revenue on a consideration. Land tax, rental tax, financial service tax, and foreign currency purchase tax. You can get more information by going to www.gov.bm/pre-budget report, and I'll turn it over to the minister.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. We're now going to open it up to questions, and I'll leave it to Ms. Bedemosi Wilson to kind of give you the rules for how we engage in Q&A.
One more. Just one more. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of members of Parliament and members of the Senate who are also here with us this evening. We have a lot of people that have joined us, and in order to make sure that we get as many questions answered as possible, I'm going to ask us to follow just a few simple rules. First of all, if you have a question, there are 2 microphones on the side of the room. Go to one of the microphones, and I will go to each alternatively in order to get the questions. You have 2 minutes to provide your comment or to ask a question. And I'm going to ask, because we have a lot of people and we'll probably have a lot of questions, that you only go to the microphone once. If you do not wish to go to a microphone, I have 2 colleagues here, Honey and Michael. They each have index cards and pens. Raise your hand and they will bring you an index card. And then they'll bring the index card to me and I will read your question. If you're using an index card, please print so that I can understand your writing and ask the right question on your behalf. Those of you who are watching on government's Facebook page, if you have a question, post your comments, and I have my phone here with me, and I will check the Facebook page periodically and ask questions of the minister and junior minister from our Facebook page. Now, if there are issues that come up that are outside of the scope of today's meeting, which is the pre-budget report, we will make note, my colleague Heine will make notes, and we will look at how we can address it outside of this forum. Okay? So, feel free to go to any one of the mics, and we will get started. Anybody in the car? And I'll also be keeping track of the time.
Good evening, Mr. Dickinson, and
it's good to see you again.
Yes, it is. I didn't make the meeting, so I said I'll come and ask you a question in public. So, my question is, the pre-budget report highlights the America's Cup as a large positive for the economy. So, has there been any thought to emphasizing that type of alternative revenue generator instead of raising taxes again, which, judging by the graphs and charts that we've been looking at today, haven't been very effective to this point?
I'm not sure if the America's Cup was highlighted in the pre-budget report, other than to say that it happened and that there was...
What it says, sorry, just not to cut you off, sorry. It says, buoyed by growth in the U.S. economy and the hosting of the America's Cup, Bermuda's economy rebounded in 2017 after experiencing contraction of 0.1% the previous year.
Okay, so the America's Cup did happen. It did have an effect on the economy, a stimulative effect on the economy. There is a certain amount of lead time to these kinds of one-off events. We have not been able to identify another one like that yet, and in as much as we can, we will certainly try to, but in the meantime, we have to go about running the business of the government. So I can't project or anticipate that an America's Cup will happen next year, so in the meantime, I need to work with the hand that I've been dealt.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to acknowledge all of the MPs that are here representing. It's so nice to have everybody here. It's open. You guys are transparent. I really appreciate that. No. I'm here to vehemently and express my vehement disappointment for the rental tax. It seems as if the PLP solution to the financial challenges are just to tax everyone, just to tax, which was never mentioned during the celebrations or festivities that occurred on Court Street after you guys were elected. No one talked about raising taxes at this rate. I asked the question, you know, what's the development with FinTech? Where's the progress of Bermudians coming home from the UK? What are the efforts being made to do that? In my opinion, the PLP are not being consistent with their campaign promises at this time. In response to the tax rental, I have actually submitted a petty paper to the Office of the Tax Commission to find out what are the arrears currently for taxes. How much do people owe that are not paying? Before you introduce any new taxes, you need to ensure that there's an effective mechanism in place to collect the taxes that are currently in arrears.
30 seconds.
Mr. Curtis Dickerson, Mr. Finance Minister, we both have knowledge and experience in the banking industry. When customers at the bank do not pay their taxes or fees on time, the bank aggressively pursues them to get those taxes. I implore you, I beg, I humbly request that you put a mechanism in place to collect the taxes in arrears. And what's to stop people from not paying the taxes that are in place right now?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, Corey, thanks for your questions. I'm going to address the ones related to taxes and the rental tax and tax collection. The idea around a rental tax was an idea that was a recommendation from the Tax Reform Commission. The purpose of the pre-budget report is to elicit feedback from a range of recommendations that have been presented to me to consider as I go about developing a budget for the country. Here are some obvious kind of facts. We have a national debt of $2.465 billion. We have a deficit projected this year to be approximately $89 million. We have a shrinking population, an aging population, and we've had a number of jobs leave Bermuda. But we still have to operate a government. And so the problems that I need to solve is how do I effectively raise enough funding to run the government to be able to provide services to the citizenry. I agree with you that we can do a lot more work to improve our collection of taxes, including those that are past due. In my first public statement as the Minister of Finance, I think on November the 4th, when I spoke to ABEAR, I talked about if I had my druthers in terms of how to run this economy, the first source of revenue would be coming from growing the economy. The second would be from doing a better job of collecting the taxes that are currently on the books. We have a number of challenges in government, some that you may be aware of. One of them is that we have systems infrastructure that is antiquated. And so I am focused on the Office of the Tax Commissioner for a couple of reasons. One, it is the body that is responsible for the largest collection of revenue for the government. Two, it needs to be more effective in how it does its job. But we can't hogtie people and have them do their best work. And so my responsibility is to help figure out how do we get systems in place, better processes in place, to be able to address collecting our taxes more effectively and more efficiently. The rent tax, circling back for a moment, is an idea that has been floated to get feedback from people. I have not decided yet what the components of the revenue are going to be going forward. Contrary to postings on Facebook or the news, I have not made a decision. I am honoring what I intend to have happen in this process. I will go out in front of audiences, I will present the ideas in the pre-budget report, and I will listen to concerns and I will evaluate those concerns as I go about making a decision over the course of the coming weeks. I may decide to put in place a rent tax at a much higher threshold than the Tax Reform Commission has decided, because I'm considering all the factors that I should be considering, including the impact of these taxes on the citizenry. Some folks can more afford it than others, and that should be a consideration that I should take into account as I make my decision.
Thank you, Minister. Next question.
Evening, everyone. Something that stood out to me in the pre-budget report, there was a chart breaking down the revenue and expenses for the budget from the prior year budget to this year's budget. And one line item was, looked like an increase, a double for international companies for revenues from 4.5 million to 9 million. And I was wondering if that is a result in increased taxes, or is that also a result in increased presence of more companies on the island? And if so, can you break that down?
Was that chart that you saw in a recommendation in the Tax Reform Commission report, or was it in the pre-budget report?
It was in the pre-budget report.
Okay. There was a table in the pre-budget report that includes the recommendations made by the Tax Reform Commission. We showed, like a menu, all the things that the Tax Reform Commission recommended. We then had an introductory paragraph following that on page 29, and midway through the page, showed those ideas that were actively under consideration. The international companies is probably an increase in fees more than an increase in number of companies, because one of the recommendations was that we should probably consider raising the fees that we charge on international companies.
Can I follow up? So is there any, as far as, I guess, budgeting or forecasting for what we consider to be increased presence of companies on the island, whether it's new or looking to increase the footprint of the ones that are registered here? Is that anywhere, did I miss that somewhere in the budget, or is that kind of independent of this?
Well, there is no budget yet. This is just a pre-budget report. We are still getting early numbers in January. We know that incorporations were up. We also have this big thing called economic substance, which we're all trying to figure out what the impact of that is. So not yet. We're still developing the budget.
Thank you very much. I have a question from Facebook, Minister. As a millennial, I am concerned with what I see. I am part of the working middle class, and it looks as if I may face more taxation. Home ownership is looking less attractive, and to top it off, I am at risk of not receiving a pension when I retire. What is this government and this budget going to do for me as a taxpayer? And that's from somebody watching on Facebook.
I would say to the millennial who asked the question via Facebook a couple of things. With respect to taxes, I am trying to strike a very, very, very delicate balance between finding ways of increasing revenue to fund the government, to reduce the deficit, reduce the debt, and minimizing folks' tax obligation. And it is a challenging opportunity for me. It's a difficult job, but I signed up for it and I'm ready to do it. As it relates to home ownership, I would say stay tuned. There are some interesting things that we are in the process of doing to afford greater access to home ownership for a broader group of Bermudians. I'm not prepared this evening to announce what that is, as we're still working through the particulars around this program. And as it relates to your pension, I'm not sure if you're talking about social insurance or your company pension. If you're a government employee, there are some challenges with the Public Service Superannuation Fund, but we are working to address those issues to sustain that fund for longer periods of time.
Thank you.
Good evening, all. The minister mentioned that some folks are paying land tax as low as $23 on a one-bedroom, and some people are paying as much as $36,000. So my question was, what size of a house is paying $36,000, and do the person that's on the low end paying $23 have to worry about it increasing by vast amounts.
So I would suspect that the person paying $36,000 has a really, really, really big house.
You could tell me one bedroom. You could tell me that.
And those persons, by the way, pay the bulk of the land tax the government collects.
Mm-hmm.
The persons who pay towards the low end, what was proposed is that we raise the minimum tax on homes below $22,000 ARV to $500. We have included in our proposal for land tax raising that number to $250 to make it a flat rate for the first $22,000 of annual rental value. My own view is that it probably costs us more than $23 to process a tax return for that home that comes in at less than $22,000. So they're under consideration is potentially to raise the taxes on homes below $22,000 to a minimum of a flat rate of $250 per year.
So when doing this, are we taking into account that some of these homeowners are seniors and how they're making is depending on that income?
Seniors are exempt from land tax. Up to 45.
Not on their apartments, though. Not on rental apartments.
As I said earlier, the rent tax is still under consideration,
yes.
And what the levels will be in terms of those homes that are, or those rental units that are impacted have not been decided. The Tax Reform Commission suggested $22,000. I have some discretion as the minister to set that level at what I think is appropriate. More likely than not, it will be above $22,000. Actually, let me be a little bit more clear. It will be above $22,000.
Hold your taxi. All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir?
Good evening, all. Back to the rental tax. Understanding Bermuda's financial situation, I understand that some things must happen to correct the financial woes. When we look at the ARV, what kind of time frame are we looking at? Right now you're doing consultation. Are we looking at probably by the end of the year, something will come down where we have to increase our payments? And the reason I'm asking is because my mother's 92. I have to pay for her care. And the rental money is going to go for her care. So I need to start figuring out what my plan B is going to be, and that's why I'm trying to get a sense of the timeline of this proposal.
I will be delivering a budget to the House of Assembly on February 22nd, and in that budget will include my proposals on where the rent tax levels should be set should I introduce a residential rental tax.
Okay.
Furthermore, the land tax numbers take effect, I think, through June or July. So if there is a tax on rents, it probably becomes operable post-July.
Okay, thank you.
Minister, let me read you a question from the floor. Would you, as finance minister, agree with this simple economic principle that higher taxes leaves less money to stimulate the economy, and higher taxes has the real potential to cause the economy to contract more, causing more economic pain to poor and middle-class Bermudians?
I would agree that increased burdens on individuals, whether they be taxpayers or consumers, decreases disposable income and can have a depressive impact on economic activity. And I chose to respond to that question that way because taxes don't only have a depressive impact on economic activity. Unreasonable pricing also has a negative impact on economic activity. Interest rates being raised also has an impact on disposable income, therefore impacts economic activity. So there are a number of factors that raising of will have an impact on the economy. The problem that I have to solve and the thinking that I am doing over the course of the next couple of weeks is looking at balance. how do I gain more revenue to fund the government while having as little impact, negative impact, on the economy? I think we would all agree that, and I certainly will agree to this, someone who has had some level of success in my life, that those of us who have more should be prepared to pay a little bit more. The country needs to get itself out of its fiscal challenges, the debt, the deficit, and until we can grow this economy, we have to find ways of raising money. On November the 1st, when I was sworn in, I said in my acceptance remarks that I accept that this is a difficult job. My commitment to you is that I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, taking into consideration all of the impacts that the decisions I take with respect to running the government's fiscal matters will have on the constituents, on the citizenry.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Good evening. I want to know, how dare the PLP want to raise tax on people that struggle so hard to get their own home and with apartment to help them out when they're not working and when they're laid off from their job. My thing is that we work so hard to get a house over our head so we won't have to pay rent. We work so hard with 2 or 3 jobs to get a house, even with an income, 1 or 2 bedroom income. With this tax that you're going to propose and want to pass it on to everybody in Bermuda, once you let this go through, if you pass it, you can, what it's going to do, you're going to end up earning everybody's house in Bermuda. Because when we get behind our tax in paying the government, and after so many years of not paying, which can lead to thousands of dollars, it's going to be a note sent to us, if you pay this $40,000, $25,000, we're going to come and take your house. So once you pass this house, this type of tax on people's home, that means that the government owns all the houses in Bermuda. Because when people can't pay their tax, or they're laid off, or for some reason when they're 65 years old and getting bad health and they can't afford to pay, who do you think's going to own your house?
30 seconds.
Right. So that's what I don't like. So my thing is, how dare you guys want to raise a tax on people who earn homes with an income? Or even when they only have just a house, they have to move out and move into a cheap apartment so they can get their rent to pay for the apartment. We work too hard for that, for you guys coming with this type of thing. Okay? Because it's not fair, and I think you should think of another way how to do it. Because right now, you guys are paying for healthy guys working on time, not working, and you're putting them in houses. And you're paying for the rent, the expense, the food, and everything. Also, the ladies, young girls that are not working, you're paying for their housing. And what they're doing, having babies. And you're paying like $2,300 for the roof of the head. These are healthy people. I'm not talking about people that are sick or from Mavi. I'm talking about healthy young guys that you can take and train them and make them earn their money.
Thank you,
to pay their rent.
Thank you, ma'am.
So take it out of hard-working people.
Thank you.
We have to work 2 or 3 jobs and sacrifice our family to get a roof over our head so we won't have to pay rent when we get older. Now, when you start doing this here, once you pass the law, every house in Bermuda is yours.
Thank you.
And I hope Bermudians can see beyond their nose. Because right now, a lot of people are in the seas right here. And a lot of people don't know nothing about this meeting here tonight. A lot of people. I didn't hear about it until after 10 o'clock last night. I didn't see it advertised on TV. I didn't see it in the paper. And I didn't see it on the news or any of the stations. So this is a prime thing. Because I think that what you're going to do is trying to slide this under the cover real quick and bring it up. And how many people of you here can stand up for your rents? You're rich enough to pay this rent, this tax increase.
Thank you.
You need to stand up for your rent because you got to look beyond your nose because what's going to happen, but what's going to happen, you're going to end up losing your term. Once this deal goes through.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Let me say this again, and hopefully I can be clearer this time. It is not the government's intention to take people's homes. As I've said before, this is a proposal that was made as part of a report. This is one of the proposals that was made as part of the Tax Reform Commission's report. We are considering it, and we brought it to the public to get feedback. That's the first thing. Secondly, the proposal says that anyone who has a house worth more than $22,000, an ARV worth more than $22,000, should pay some sort of tax on it. It is a recommendation that I am considering. I think I said earlier that if your home is, if the ARV in your apartment is less than $22,000, there will be no tax on it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Minister.
Ma'am, I will do the analysis. I will look at the impacts, and then I will make a decision that I think is the best one for all people involved.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Minister. We'll go to the next question over here.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to get feedback from the community. Really appreciate that. My question is coming from a Bermudian as an employee of a Bermuda exempted company, and I understand that this is in the very early stages and you're still considering the pre-budget report. The pre-budget report refers to a proposal for a managed services tax for professional services provided by overseas businesses to local and international companies. My question is it envisaged that this will apply to all companies, including exempted companies? And then the second part of my question is, has there been any discussions pertaining to a potential carve-out for affiliates of Bermuda companies who are performing services overseas? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thanks for the question. So, one of the purposes of the report is to encourage debate on ideas. The managed services tax, the genesis behind the recommendation is that there are people who fly into Bermuda to provide services to Bermuda-based companies. They are paid by these companies, and the income that they earn is not taxed at all because they get back on the plane and go back to where they came from. Many times there are companies here in Bermuda who provide those same services, and those people are required to pay taxes on their earnings. So the recommendation was intended to level the playing field. The recommendation also contemplated that it would take 12 to 24 months to implement a managed services tax. I floated that idea in the pre-budget report to get a reaction and some feedback on how it could work and what its impact would be. I can tell you that in terms of decisions that I've made, it's very unlikely that there will be a managed service tax as part of the 2019-2020 budget.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Minister, I have some more questions from the floor. What percent or dollar value did revenue decrease as a result of airport taxes being transferred to Skyport or ACON?
I don't know what percentage. I think the revenue number was about $48 million. And I think the cost number was about $13 million. So net loss to the government, 48 minus 13 is $35 million annually.
Thank you. I'll take another question. Clarify tax on rental units consideration to waiving rental tax on ARVs less than $90,000. Question, is this $90,000 ARV threshold the sum of a number of rental units owned by one owner? Another question, for over ARV over $90,000, will the tax rate be incremental per ARV band? So it's
okay. So with respect to real estate investors who have a portfolio of properties that have ARVs of less than 22,000. The recommendation was that if you have more than 4 properties, then you should pay the tax. What the rate would be 5%. So this is for folks who are real estate investors who have more than 4 properties. That was the first part. And the second part of the question? For over ARVs of 90,000, will tax rate be incremental per ARV band? No.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll take one more card, which has 2 questions. Is there any plan to raise the retirement/pension age to 67? And the second question, is the proposed rent tax on commercial properties payable even if the property is empty?
With respect to the raising of the retirement age, I am in the process, my team is in the process of doing some work around pension reform. Among the recommendations I would envisage is potentially raising the retirement age. That work is ongoing, and there is no definitive position yet as to when we would do that or if we would do it.
Excellent.
With respect to commercial rents, I guess it would stand to reason that if the place isn't rented, then it isn't reasonable for me to expect to collect rent on it.
No? Okay. Thank you. Sir?
There are no easy answers. There's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that any government can do that will improve a complex situation. We see, to the surprise and horror of people in Toronto, that their Airbnb homes are now being taxed at higher and higher levels. We see this in the UK. The US has its own forms of this. So we're not alone. We're not alone. I appreciate the concerns from my friend Coy, from the young lady here, from others that haven't yet spoken, but there will be no quick and easy solution. And when we raise the subject of tax, sometimes tax sounds like a 4-letter word. I think any time that in my business dealings that I've been in a really, really difficult, complex situation, the most important thing was to have really, really good people working with you. And I feel really, really fortunate that we have someone like the finance minister that we have. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us, if he's trying to do his best, for us to try and do our best. I have tangled with everybody from the Director of Land Valuation, whom I deeply respect. I'm one of those people who is paying the $36,000, and I am confident that we will get through this. I am confident that if we have this meeting 2 years from now, it's going to look better. There'll be surprises, things we didn't anticipate, good and bad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister?
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Good evening, Minister. Just I guess, a clarification in the time frame that was mentioned earlier in the question that was asked about implementation. I'm looking at page number 28 of the pre-budget report, and I think it has some time frames in it for implementation. It speaks about 12 months, it speaks about 24 months. So I'm not sure if some of these taxes are going to happen in 2019 as opposed to them happen in the time frame that's in there. The other observation, Minister, is on page number 19 of the pre-budget report. Looking at this 12-year cycle of revenues versus expenditure versus surpluses. Certainly looking at the junior minister's comments in relationship to the number of people that were employed in Bermuda, particularly in 2008. We had 40,000, as he said, 213. 2017, we're down about 34,000. But when we look at the revenue, Revenue was $929 million in 2008. Revenue in 2017 is at $988 million. So even though we got less people, the revenue is still about the same in the workforce. So I'm not sure how we made up all that shortfall. Second of all, I think that if 2018, where you're projecting a $67 million shortfall, what's the projected number for 2019, or 2019-20, if you don't get any of these tax increases? What's the projected budget shortfall for this fiscal period?
30 seconds. Thank you.
Well, the shortfall will be a function of how much tax revenue I'm able to raise. If we assume that they stay at 2018-19 levels, there's about $1.1 billion is the estimate for this year. With the package of taxes that are included in the pre-budget report, that goes to $1.140, so about $50 million of incremental revenue. We've discussed the $50 million number in the pre-budget report. I am still evaluating whether that is the right number. I am actually actively thinking about making it a smaller number so that the quantum of tax increases will be smaller than those that are shown inside the pre-budget report. Again, I'm trying to find balance here because every dollar I take out of your pocket is a dollar less that you can spend in our economy. The first observation that you made with respect to the revenue number being fairly flat, notwithstanding the decline in population, is a result of basically everyone paying more. And therein lies, I think, the rub for all of us, I think, and everybody in this room, irrespective of your political persuasion. I think we can all agree on one thing. We all hate paying more tax. But in order to run this government and provide the levels of services that people demand from us, we have to pay for it. And so while we're working to grow the economy, and that's going to take some time, we have to look at ways of trying to grow revenue strategically without having a depressive impact on the economy.
Thank you, Minister. I'll take some more, give you some more questions from the cards. The figure of 22,000, which keeps getting mentioned, has been chosen for a reason. What is that reason? And would not have been more consistent to use the figure 22,800, which is the number rent control uses? I ask this question because property owners of rent-controlled units are often in great need of that income. The units traditionally are small and often attached to the owner-occupied home.
I was not a member of the Tax Reform Commission, so in this instance I'm going to defer to the junior minister who might have some perspective on that.
You're right. I mean, basically we should have put 22,800 because it should have fallen under the rent control. So whoever asked the question is correct. So if the minister looks at it, maybe 22,800 under rent control.
So I amend my prior comment when I said if it's below 22,000, if it's below 22,800.
Next question. The proposal to tax landlords for international company tenants is discriminatory. Landlords, in turn, may discriminate on tenant selection. This is a human rights issue, and careful attention to cross this line should be paid before this.
Okay. I think I recall which section of the report that comment emanates from, and I would say this. The phrasing in that paragraph was inelegant. The tax would apply to everybody, irrespective of whether the company occupying the space was local or an international company.
Okay, thank you. What is the government's plan to gain revenue loss from the 16,000 international business companies incorporated here so as they, as they wire? As they will, sorry, as they will not be able to set up a substantial presence here. What is the government's plan to gain revenue lost from the 16,000 IB companies incorporated here, as they will not be able to set up a substantial presence here?
Okay, so this question relates to economic substance. I'm not sure if I accept the premise that 16,000 companies will not be able to set up here. I think companies will make a determination for themselves as to whether or not it makes sense for them to be here from an economic substance perspective. And should they choose to be here, that actually is a benefit to Bermuda, because they will be required to hire people to work here to qualify for substance. The fact of the matter is, we don't know today whether someone will make a decision to stay or to go, because the standards are still being developed. And so it will take some time before we get all the answers to this, and we actually haven't even had feedback yet from the European Union as to whether or not our standards actually qualify, as to whether or not we have passed the mark, so to speak.
All right, two more questions. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening to you. Just two questions, really. One of the things we suffer from in this island is being honest. And so I want you to answer me honestly. The island needs to hear you. Are we bankrupt?
No.
Do we need to nationalize essential services, i.e. the hospitals and whatever, because we seem to do a lot of outsourcing. And I'm wondering if it would help our economy if government decided, since it is already the largest employer, with the skill sets that's in our island, this community, if we could run all of our business, total business, do we need to nationalize a lot of the companies that we currently have here? And otherwise, we'll continue to be a financial drain. We're already in a crisis, as I perceive it. There's a moral bankruptcy, spiritual bankruptcy, and now I'm listening to financial bankruptcy and a strategy in which to salvage things, and I appreciate that. But my question still begs answering. Do we need to nationalize the hospitals? Do we need to nationalize some of these places that are really draining our economy?
Thank you.
Let me be clear, because I said no before. No, we are not bankrupt. That's the first thing. Secondly, the hospital is a quango, which means a quasi-government-owned organization. I believe the shareholder for the hospital is the Minister of Health, therefore the government. The reason why our healthcare costs are high is because people are living longer and getting sicker. I don't think that that is a function of poor management of resources. It's a reality of kind of how we are living.
Good evening, Minister.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. First, let me make this comment. I think it's important that the PRP government keep the roadshow going so that Bermudians can understand what it means to have a financial deficit. And as we look to the islands to the south of us, one of those islands is under the IMF. Bermuda does not want to find itself under the constraints of the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. And this is why it's important to talk about taxes. On page 28, the proposed new taxes. The general service tax, you just articulated that the tax department doesn't have the infrastructure. How do you envision that the businesses and the government is going to aid itself in order to deliver in 24 months versus VAT, value-added tax? So that's the first question. And we looked at the proposed reforms of existing taxes, financial services and banks, insurers. We all know that they deliberately pass those taxes on to consumers. And so the consumer has found itself paying more for the services of which it was intended for the banks and for the insurers. How are you going to ensure that they pay their quote-unquote service tax rather than passing it on, if possible? And I note that the customs duty has been decreased. Is there any thought about
30 seconds.
Raising that tax in order to make up any deficit that value-added tax may have brought in?
Thank you.
So the taxes that you refer to on page 28, what we've effectively done is take the recommendations that were contained in the Tax Reform Commission's report and shown them inside of the pre-budget statement. And that represents everything that was recommended. In the middle of page 29, there's a paragraph that says, however, these are the things that we are considering. We are not considering a general service tax. It's not on the table. I mentioned earlier that I did include the managed services tax, but that is not going to happen because it's going to take at least 2 years to implement. The strategy that I'm trying to follow is if the tax is easy to implement and easy to collect, I'm more inclined to look to that as being a source of revenue because I understand the limitations that we currently have with systems and collection. But I can tell you this, collection and enforcement are a priority of this government. And we accept that we need to do a better job of it. We've actually hired more resources to kind of help us tackle this issue. And we're just going to stay consistent on it until we collect as much of the past due taxes as possible. With respect to customs duties, I think the reductions that are being contemplated are for essential items and children's clothing as a way to try to lighten the burden for certain people.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to do a quick time check. It's 7:22, and we'll end promptly at 7:30. So we have maybe 2 or 3 more questions time left. Sir?
Good evening, Mr. Minister.
Good evening.
We sit here and we talk. Financial jargon is being televised around Bermuda. And I think the average Bermudian wants to hear some nuts and bolts stuff. A lot of people aren't as educated as we are in this room. And I'm not trying to be insulting, but I'm telling you, the people who are listening to this television right now would like to have some answers to questions like this. How is it that over the years, people have put the money into the companies, they haven't paid their health insurance, they haven't paid their pensions, today they are suffering, and nobody's addressed that yet. This is the nuts and bolts of what Bermuda's experiencing. And I'd like to know, would you undertake, or would your government undertake, to pursue those people who have put people in jeopardy right now because they don't get a decent pension, they're relying on their rents, and when they have a tenant, and the tenant doesn't pay, what happens? The government says you can't put them out, but the bank says you have to pay us. Why is it that nobody in either government or whatever party you say has tackled the crisis that some people over 65, some people under 65, because not everybody's a senior, but they still rely on their rents because they have children in college, etc., etc., etc. And nobody sits up and stands up for the small man who built this house, rents his house.
30 seconds.
The tenant doesn't pay. The bank still wants his money, and the government says you can't go. Please address that. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. I will say this. So those of you who know me know that I am 12 weeks into this job. And 6 months, 7 months into being a member of Parliament. I can't speak for what happened before I got here, but what I can tell you is this. I have been consistent in saying this, that we need to do a better job of collecting the taxes that are on the books. We need to do a better job of collecting money that is owed to government. And every dollar that I can collect from that's already owed to me is a dollar less that I can burden you with in terms of incremental new taxes. So I said earlier, we need to do a better job of going after people who don't pay. If get them is kind of, to break it down, we need to get them. and prosecute them and hound them. And we also need to make sure that people understand that when their employers aren't paying their fair share, their pensions, their taxes, they need to report them. Because sometimes the authorities just don't know. I mentioned earlier that our systems, from a tax collection perspective, are antiquated, are old. We will work over the course of this year on trying to figure out how to get something newer in place so that we can be better able to collect money that's owed to us.
All right. I'll take one quick question from Facebook, and I think we'll probably be done at that point. And with our decreasing population in Bermuda and the mention of immigration reform in the budget, what is the government's plan for immigration reform for those that are impacted, and when do they anticipate to have a resolution?
So, I'm the Minister of Finance. And this is my show tonight, not the Minister of Immigration. Okay. So I will say this, that's an immigration issue, and I will address it this way. We intend to bring comprehensive immigration reform to Parliament this parliamentary session.
Okay. And one final question. What are your thoughts that the increase in taxes is depleting our middle class?
I mentioned earlier this concept of balance, and I know, so I ride a bicycle for my mental health. Some would say that I'm crazy for doing that, but I ride up and down mountains, and so I practice balance every day that I go out on the road on my bike. And I practice balance, I think, and my wife might disagree with me, I try to practice balance in my day-to-day life. The problems that we have to solve require a bit of pull and a bit of push. We have to balance this in a way to get a better outcome for the economy, for the country's fiscal situation. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that in helping to solve this problem, that proportionately we're all kind of all contributing to the solution. So the intention here is not to tax the middle class out of the middle class. It's to kind of try to figure out how we can best architect a solution to solve the problem while being as least disruptive to everyone.
Well, thank you, Minister. Do you want to say a few closing words?
Sure. Thanks. So first, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is, I think, the third or fourth session that I've had, the first with the general public, and it has been enlightening and refreshing. And I want to thank you for your questions and thank you for your candor. I need you to understand that I have not made any decisions yet on revenue with respect to new taxes other than that there will not be a managed services tax. And I have also decided that the rental tax, if implemented, will not extend to people with rental units with an ARV less than $22,800. I'd like to thank all of my parliamentary colleagues and caucus colleagues for coming out. I'd like to thank the Junior Minister of Finance. I'd like to thank my Financial Secretary, who's working overtime without getting paid for it. I'd like to also thank the Premier, of course, for being here, and thank all of you for your candor. This process is ongoing. I am expected to deliver a budget on the 22nd of February. We have a mailbox. I think it's OpenGov, Open Budget. Can you get back, Anthony? The pre-budget report is at www.gov/pre-budget report, and then there's an email address as well set up for you to send in questions or concerns, and we'll get that number. We'll get that for you. But the goal of this exercise is to be transparent and to hear your concerns and to take those concerns into consideration as we go about formulating a budget for 2019-2020. Thanks everyone for coming. Take care.